Welcome, everyone. My name is Ramin Talesh. I'm the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Life and Leadership and Dean of Students here at UCI. And on behalf of the organizing committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the What Matters to Me and Why series here at UCI. I do want to apologize right off the bat that there were some technical difficulties, I think, in some of our Zoom attendee Zoom, what do we call it? Addresses, I guess, that went out. So we had to fix that at the last minute. And hopefully that wasn't too much of an issue for folks. And we're glad that you're here with us today. I do have some housekeeping items before we hear from Michael Arias, our speaker today. Number one, this session is being recorded. So just keep that in mind. The session is being recorded. Also, we will have evaluations at the very end, and we all read those, and it's an opportunity for you, the audience members, to let us know and nominate some future speakers, as well as give us feedback on the session today. As you can tell, we've gone virtual. We used to have the series on campus, but now we're doing it virtually, and it's and we still think that we have something that's a really good opportunity to hear from some of our great speakers. For those of you who are attending for the first time, this speaker series is designed to give people at UCI a chance to hear from someone, either a faculty member or a staff member, on a real personal level. And every month we try to have this program, so look forward into the future. And we allow the speaker to have some time to speak to the audience about what matters to them and why. And then we also allow ample time for Q&A at the end. So look forward to having Q&A today as well. We really want our speakers to really kind of address that one question again, as authentically as they can, and let it take them wherever it goes. And so I'm sure our speaker today will let it go in all kinds of different directions as well. We hope that you will also consider maybe, again, nominating other future speakers into the future. I do want to let folks know that we do have live transcription available as well. So you should have that opportunity if you need to have transcription down on the bottom of your screen. You can hit the live transcript and you should be able to get subtitles rolling on that way as well. I do want to acknowledge the Office of the Chancellor and the Campus Climate Committee for their support of this program. Also, this special program today is being co-sponsored with Phi Beta Kappa Honor Society. And so we welcome many of the Phi Beta Kappa members who are here and taking part and participating in this talk today as well. So welcome to all of you. And if you're not aware, we actually have a spin-off of this series with our medical school colleagues as well, and a UCI Alumni Association as well. We actually had Dr. Jose Mayorga speaking earlier this month, and we had a great attendance from students and staff alike, and and faculty. So again, we have lots of different What Matters to Me, Why series going on here at UC Irvine, and it's a great program. I'm glad to be affiliated with it. In a moment, you'll hear from retired academic counselor at UC Irvine, Kim Ayala, introducing our speaker today. But one of the traditions that we have when we do this series is that we allow for the audience members to meet one another. You go to your neighbor and you ask them, maybe introduce themselves, and you would introduce yourself, and you turn to the other person and do the same thing. So we're going to try to do that virtually right now with breakout rooms. So we have UCI Media Will Alvarez in the back, and Will is going to get us going to breakout rooms, and then you'll have a chance to introduce yourself to your neighbors in that breakout room. So with the magic of Zoom, take it away, Will.
Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Ayala. I'm newly retired, and I'm the former director of the Undergraduate Undeclared Advising Office. I hope you got that. I just don't know when he unmuted me. I would like to introduce to you Michael Arias, who served as a UCI staff member for nearly 40 years. He joined UCI in 1979, starting as support staff for the School of Physical Sciences. 2 years later, he became director of the academic budget until 1990, when he was named assistant dean of the School of Social Sciences. In 1998, he was recruited to be Associate Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief of Staff. Mike has played many critical roles here at UCI, where senior leadership relied greatly on his deep knowledge and insightful advice. As one of Chancellor Gillman's principal advisors from 2014 until his retirement in 2018, Mike played a major role in every significant initiative in recent years, including the development of the UCI Strategic Plan, the establishment of the Sue and Bill Gross School of Nursing, the creation of the Susan and Henry Samueli College of Health Sciences, the gift of the Buck Collection of California Art, the construction of 2 student housing complexes, the Anteater Learning Pavilion, and the planning for the Interdisciplinary Science and Engineering Building. He also served on the UCI Foundation Board of Trustees and the Chief Executive Roundtable, demonstrating admirable skills in connecting with our external partners. His decades of contributions have been enormously valuable and will benefit UCI for generations to come. Mike is a proud anteater, earning his bachelor's degree in social sciences, graduating magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa. Mike continues to serve as secretary of the UCI Phi Beta Kappa chapter. Please help me welcome my friend and fellow retiree, Mike Arias.
It was like it's me. I didn't hear any applause at all. I'm so disappointed. So I'm not much of a speaker. So, looking up things, they have your rules for speaking and the things to do and not do. The first thing it says is don't apologize. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apologize. This is not my milieu, Zoom or whatever it's called. I'm going to do my best. I am going to try and read from my notes, but not, just read in a monotone thing, and we'll go from there. So thank you for putting this on. Thank you for attending. And I went blank, sorry. Another opportunity to hear from an old white man. You just don't get that enough these days, do you? I'm very grateful and flattered to have been invited. And I'm a little daunted because if you look at the list of speakers, they're typically pretty highly accomplished folks, usually faculty members who have devoted their whole professional lives to something that they have a passion for. And so they're able, I think, to speak extemporaneously on things and sound right and sound good. You look at the list, I'm speaking in the same forum that Michael Drake spoke, Jim McGaugh spoke, Ngugi wa Thiong'o spoke, Beth Loftus spoke, Julia Lupton, just a lot of people. I don't feel like I really belong in that group. But that notwithstanding, I wonder what I would talk about. So I asked the folks that had invited me to talk, and it seemed that the theme that described their coming up with me involved my successful by some standards and highly unlikely career at UCI. So I'm going to just ignore the prompt, what matters to me and why, and talk about my career at UCI in sort of a chronological fashion. And if there's anything profound or otherwise to take away from it, that'd be great, but that's on you. So even though I started pretty young at UCI, that wasn't my first job. My first job I got when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And we lived in a pretty modest little neighborhood with a lot of kids running around. Many, if not most of the homes were run by single working mothers. So we were unfettered kids running around the neighborhood. And my friend Brad Peterson and I got into a few things. And about that time, they mowed down a farm across the street and turned it into a golf driving range. And that was like a source of great excitement for the whole neighborhood. Kids were watching it. You'd see people drive up in their fancy cars and pull out and swing and hit golf balls out into this vast field. The most interesting thing about it was the tractor that picked up the golf balls. Some lucky bastard got to drive in that thing with a chicken wire cage on him and be protected while the balls were hitting him. And we just were drawn to it like magnets. Well, my friend Brad and I thought that we would take advantage of this local economic boon. And we crossed the busy street and we asked to speak with the owner and we demanded jobs. And I can't imagine what he thought, but he created a job for us. He had us come once a week for a couple hours and rake the grass up where the tees were. he wouldn't let us out where the action was, but we would rake the grass. And we got for that the princely sum of two bits each, 25 cents. We were pretty living pretty large. And after the first day of doing this job and seeing all the golfers come and go and swing at those balls, you're a 7 or 8 year old kid, you're pretty excited by that, pretty interested. So we thought we'd walk into the pro shop and use our newfound wealth to buy a bucket of balls and go try it ourselves. And we were in there trying to decide, the economic nuances between us each getting a small 25-cent bucket or pooling our resources for the really large 50-cent bucket. We're doing that. We're talking to the guy behind the counter, and in came in the owner. And the owner asked us what we were doing, and we explained we were going to get some balls. And he, to this day, I remember this. He put an arm around each of us. He got between us, put an arm, and he said to the guy behind the counter, "These here are company men, and company men golf for free." Whoa, company men. We felt pretty good. We were company men. And so we swung out there. We, got bored before we were halfway through the bucket of balls. But I guess a takeaway I had from that, even at that early age, was, it's kind of nice to be part of something bigger than yourself. And that's certainly what the golf course was. So now we were in our neighborhood. We were men of substantial means. We kind of had a little swagger. And I'd like to tell you that we used our new resources wisely and charitably, but we did not. We were creative and inventive. What we did immediately, that first day or soon after, was we went to the local liquor store and, bought a bunch of candy. And we also bought they had these packs of rolls of caps for cap guns. And for those in the audience who don't remember what cap guns are, in the early 1960s, the favorite theme of toys for boys were various forms of weaponry, and cap gun being probably the most popular. And a cap gun looked like a mini revolver, and you would take this tape of caps. It was like a long strip of tape with dots of gunpowder on it. And you'd roll that into the gun, and then when you'd fire the gun, the hammer would strike the gunpowder, and it would sound like real gunfire, which is just fantastic. That was the 60s. Anyway, so we were kind of bored with just that. So, mere gunfire. So we went one day to Brad's house, and Brad's brother had a job mowing lawns. And because of that, in the garage was a can of gasoline. And they had a nice, shiny, smooth driveway, concrete driveway. And we were brilliant. We thought we would pour that gasoline on the driveway, let it form a large puddle. As the puddle approached us, we would lay down one of those rolls of caps, the whole roll, and take a hammer, strike that roll of caps, and enjoy an explosive flash of flame that would immediately extinguish. It was like the most fantastic thing that ever happened on our little street. Before long, we had a group of kids with helpful suggestions like, I bet if you made that puddle bigger, the flames would be higher. And we were about halfway through our strip of caps when Brad's brother came wheeling around the corner and caught us. And removed the caps, removed the gasoline, dispersed the crowd, and Brad and I both got chewed out. Thereafter, the gasoline was no longer available in the garage, and if you went down to the liquor store, Francis, the guy that ran it, would no longer sell us caps. So that's, I guess the only takeaway from that, other than I like telling that story, is I learned that it's good to be looked after by others, and whether you're being the one being looked after or you're doing the looking after yourself. I'll get to UCI at some point. How many hours do we have? So after that, I somehow survived childhood and a variety of jobs. I worked in restaurants. I was a plumber's helper. I worked in a factory. I worked in a liquor store. Somewhere in there, I had a short stint of 1 quarter in college, and found myself in the late 70s working in a restaurant, a local restaurant, run by my friend's family. And one thing true about all those jobs I just described is one theme they all had in common was you tended to complain about them. You know, you weren't paid enough, the hours were bad, whatever. And I was working in this restaurant, and one of my regular customers, I was complaining about the job too. He worked at UCI, and he used to, from time to time, really encourage me to come work at UCI. And, you know, you're 18, 19, you know everything. So it just went in and out my ears. Well, finally, you know, I was desperate enough. So one day I said to him, okay, let's do it. When do I start? And he said, well, slow down. I got to post the job. Oh, okay. Did you post the job? Yeah, I did. Okay, great. When do I start? Well, you have to apply. Okay, so what's that? Okay, I applied. So when do I start? Well, you have to interview. So I had the interview. When do I start? Well, I hired somebody else who was more qualified. He had a college degree. I guess I just had never wrapped my head around that. I always worked in places where you're hired on the spot. The golf course, the guy hired us on the spot. Restaurants, same thing. They could also let you go on the spot, which happened, you know, a couple of times. So I finally, you know, that was a real wake up call for me. And I guess I learned that the world's bigger than I thought it was. Ultimately, though, I was persistent, and I ultimately was hired. I was hired by the same guy. His name was Leon. Hired to run the copy center in the School of Physical Sciences. What a job. It was a rocky transition. I went from being paid every 15 minutes as a bartender or a waiter to being paid once a month. I had to actually moonlight the first couple months to make my bills. But I was... plus you had to pay for parking. Outrageous. I think people are still outraged by that. But I was hired as a senior clerk to run that copy center. You notice it was senior clerk. It wasn't just a lowly clerk. It was a senior clerk. And I earned the princely sum of $727 a month. I wasn't sure how I was going to spend all that money. They sent me away for 2 days to learn how to operate the Xerox 9200. Their Xerox 9200 was this gigantic copy machine. It was like as big as an airplane and just as loud. And it could collate, it could shinny up a rope, it could do all that. It was pretty complicated. I learned that. I came back, I was operating the Xerox 9200. I was operating 3 or 4 other machines we had in the copy center, making copies and learning how it worked and making sure you recharged all the accounts that people were coming to make copies on, whether they're a research account or department account. We had different rates for inside the school versus outside the school. And then once I got the hang of it, it got a little boring. So I, you know, read Leon Uris novels, and I would start picking apart the finances. And I got to the point where in doing the finances, I concluded quite accurately that the copy center was losing money. It was, I factored in my cost, and the cost of the machines, the cost of the service, the cost of the consumables, the variable costs, and I looked at the recharges, and we were losing money. Oh my God, this great gig, and I'm going to lose it right away. But I gathered up my courage, and I came down to the dean's office, and I talked to Leon, and I explained to him, you know, you're going to have to either raise rates or let me go because the copy center's losing money. And Leon was great. He wasn't condescending or anything, but he asked me to consider the larger picture, which is, gee, we're doing teaching and research, and we need to support that often with a lot of photocopies. And if we didn't have a copy center, they'd still have to have those copies. They'd have to go elsewhere for it, probably be more expensive than here, and certainly less convenient. So we're going to keep it and subsidize it. That's what we do. And so, you know, I learned that lesson. And, you know, I guess I learned the value isn't always just dollars and cents. But one upshot of that meeting was, I'm getting over a cold, so you have to excuse me, the tea. One upshot of that was that he was impressed by my financial acumen. I hate to say that because it's so nickels and dimes, but it was some. And he promoted me to a position in the dean's office. And I did that for a couple of years, and learned a lot at his feet. I learned a lot about the school. I still was pretty unfettered. In the copy center, sometimes I'd come to work and forget to wear shoes. Once I was in the dean's office, I had to clean up my act a little bit, but not much. I still had kind of long hair and all that. And you came to look at the campus. I knew that physical sciences, which was all in one building in those days, I knew it, but I didn't know other things. I just associated, oh, that building must be biosci, and there's a lot of other buildings, so it must be a big place. And I got a little wanderlust, and I decided to apply for a job in central administration and working in academic budget. And I didn't really know that I had a chance for it, but I thought I'd try. And I remember I got an interview. I had to borrow a sports jacket and a belt to go for my interview. And lo and behold, I got the job. And the job changed my life. I started there right after about the time I got married, and I started there, and I worked for a guy named Lou. And Lou he was on his third career. He'd been a lifer in the Air Force, and then he worked in the State Department, and now he was at UC Irvine. And he was from this military background. He wasn't a hawk by any means, but the military point of view was in his very bearing. It was all inculcated into him. One of my favorite things about him was he used to refer to all of the people we worked with by their initials, and he used the military phonetic alphabet. So he was Lima Lima Bravo, and I was Metro Romeo Alpha. And everybody was like that. There was Hotel Papa Bravo, and there were all these other people. And I still fall into that sometimes now. That's the influence it was. So Lou got a hold of me, and I was completely undisciplined. At a natural distrust and defiance of authority. I cut my hair to go work over there, but I was still a long hair at heart. Undisciplined, and I'd start things and never finish. Certainly that happened with college. But he had spent his whole life in the business of developing young people. And so he made me his project. And I came to appreciate in many ways the military way of doing things. Precision is important. Knowing your goal is important. Executing that goal, not wasting any time, being accountable and responsible. He really had a change on me. It ran deep. Where I was coming from was so unmilitary. It was really a strange relationship initially. I came of age in the Vietnam War era. My father, my grandfathers, my stepfathers all had registered for the draft and been drafted. My friends' older brothers all registered for the draft. I never had to. My brother-in-law, who's less than 2 years younger than me, had to register for the draft. My son had to register for the draft. But I never lived under the cloud of having to register for the draft. If you were born between, I think, March of 1957 and December of 1959, that age group never had to. They had removed the draft and then reinstated it later, but I never had to. It didn't have that much of a consequence for me, except it affected my state of mind as sort of never really appreciating or even thinking of how the military would involve me. But as it turned out, working for Lou for those years, it did have an effect. It had an effect on not just my work ethic, but how I approached a lot of things. I'm forever a pacifist, but I'll always appreciate the military's methodical and exacting approach to problem solving, and how important it is to have precision in your work, and fairness and merit-based rewards. Okay, so working for Lou. After a couple of years, I had more and more responsibility, and once I made $1 million mistake. I don't actually remember how I did it now. I probably double counted some revenues or something, but I discovered this mistake on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend, and I knew Lou was going to go away on this long weekend for vacation, and I was at a loss. I remember running through my mind, well, I'll just quit this job and I'll go back to the restaurant business, $1 million mistake. I really struggled with telling him because I didn't want to ruin his weekend and his vacation. But what I also didn't want to do is live with that angst and anxiety the whole weekend. So I finally sucked it up and I went and I told him. And it was a hard thing to do. And I'll never forget his response. He said, everybody makes mistakes. You did the right thing by telling me. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out when I get back. Have a nice weekend. Oh, the weight was lifted. I still had to solve $1 million mistake, but it really made me feel better. And I learned the importance of owning up to your own mistakes. And when there is a problem, not wasting any energy finding fault or punishing. Just fix the damn problem. So after, 7 or 8 years with Lou in central administration, I got a little hungry for a change, and I started applying for jobs elsewhere on the campus. And I would apply for them enthusiastically, confidently, and unsuccessfully. It happened like 4 or 5 times. The worst or the most memorable was I really had my heart set on a job in the library. I thought I was going to get it. I thought the job had been designed with me in mind. And I was up for it against a good friend, and and she got that job and I didn't. And I was just crestfallen. I was inconsolable. Ultimately, I recovered, and I ended up getting a job in the School of Social Sciences in the position that's now called assistant dean, but wasn't then. And even though I had sort of deep inside me that hippie mentality, I can't tell you what a culture shock it was parachuting into social sciences. After 8 years in the admin building, I had the closely cropped hair and the suit and tie, and pretty good appreciation for rigidity and homogenized bureaucracies, and I was ready to go to social sciences and whip those guys into shape. They were still stuck in the 60s. Never met an idea they didn't love and hate at the same time. They let 1,000 flowers bloom, and they didn't even have formal departments. I was going to straighten that out. Well, I was hired by Willie the dean, and Willie was extremely wise. And the first thing he had me do was set out to meet one at a time with a series of the more senior faculty, one-on-one, and get their advice and wisdom. And that was a brilliant move by Willie. These people, to a person, these men and women were charming, generous, genuinely invested in my success. And they shared through a combination of gossip, lore, history, and academic pontifications. They really acquainted me with the school, and I came to appreciate the value. And I certainly survived in that school because of that curated orientation. And indeed, that's 30 years ago, and I still think of social sciences as my home. It's kind of where I fit the best. So I'm going to talk about faculty for a minute. So for most of my early career, especially when I was in central administration, you sort of got the feeling of faculty as, I only saw them in one context. They're usually fighting with my boss over some bureaucratic constraint or pining for more resources. And I tended to think of them as high maintenance, socially awkward, narcissistic, and too often affixed to the host that was my university. That's quite largely true. However, after living among faculty in their natural habitat, I came to see them in a better light. There are some slackers, to be sure, but most of them were very hardworking and completely dedicated to teaching, research, and service. So how do you deal with their soul-centeredness? Well, part of that, you need to understand where it comes from. So imagine you're a talented kid and you like school and you do fairly well in school. Maybe you're a little socially awkward, but you get all your rewards from the school stuff. And so you really invest in the school stuff and to the exclusion of the social stuff. So you maybe even get worse at the social stuff, but you get your rewards from that. and you get through high school, you deal with the bullies and all that. But you get through high school, you do very well, and then you go on to college. And college now, they're starting to really appreciate, there's still some of the other stuff, but they mostly really appreciate you and value based on your academic merit. So you pursue that hard, you thrive, and the better you do, the more you get rewarded. So much so that when you graduate at your baccalaureate level, you go on to graduate school. And now you're thinking, get through graduate school, I maybe even would have an academic career. So you're in graduate school, and now the stakes are higher. You're a little fish in a big pond, and everybody's brilliant. But even so, you thrive, and you get through there. And about the time you're ready to get that PhD, you start the mad rush for that holy grail, the unicorn that is a tenure track faculty appointment at a reputable university. Somehow, magically, or at least miraculously, you get, not only do you get an offer, you get a job at the University of California, Irvine. That's the mountaintop. You tell your family, you tell your friends, you think about, you wish you could see those ninth grade bullies' faces. You got this great gig. You pack up the moving van, you haul yourself out, you bring everything you own, and you arrive in Irvine. You get settled down, and you begin to start probably the first paying job you've ever had in your life. Your department chair welcomes you, puts their arm around you, and says, "Welcome, congratulations. We're going to fire you in 7 years unless you make the grade." Now, you always knew that. I mean, you always knew it sort of at some level, but now it's really there in black and white. Oh my God, they're going to fire me in 7 years. So what happens when that's the case? Well, I'll tell you what happens is everything's a crisis. I don't have enough bookcases in my office. They're going to fire me in 7 years. I got to have a bookcase in my office. The world needs to stop, and I got to get that bookcase. What do you mean there's a paper jam in the copy machine? Don't you know they're going to fire me in 7 years? An internet interruption is apocalyptic. So some of our colleagues never recover from that trauma. And so even the accomplished ones, they're all settled and all that. There's still a little bit of that, which is the world needs to be surrounded about me, because they just never recovered from that. They're going to fire me in 7 years' time. However, in the midst of all this, the best of our faculty, and by the best, I mean the vast majority of our faculty, they're really busy. They're creating and disseminating new knowledge. They're valuing and employing fact-based critical and analytical skills and abstract thinking, and they're doing it objectively. The best part of a university is its faculty. In fact, the very definition of a university is a guild or group of faculty. A university is not its buildings or its grounds. It's not the students. A university is not the staff. A university is not even its retired administrators. University is the faculty. And it's our pleasure to serve them. So, been in social sciences 8 years or so, and by then I had gone fully native. I had grown my hair out again. I was rarely wearing a coat and tie. I even grew a full beard. And I sort of saw myself being there the rest of my career. I was comfortable. As I said earlier, it was home. And because of that, change happens. We had a leadership change in the campus in 1998, and the new chancellor brought the former provost, Bill Lillyman, back to be provost for 2 years, or for a while. It ended up being 2 years. And Bill wanted to make the staff more robust in that office, so he brought me back to be his chief of staff, and back to suits and ties and haircuts, back to a more central perspective. Only this time I wasn't looking at things centrally just from a financial point of view, but from all angles. Basically, everything that happens in the university is the province of the provost, and I was his agent, so I had to be interested in everything that happened at the university. It was daunting. It was a steep and long learning curve, and so I never really got off that hill. 2 years later, Bill went back to retirement and was replaced by Mike, another Mike. At one point, the 5th floor of the admin building had 5 mics. I wanted to write a song. I was thinking about writing a song calling it Mike, 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 and Michael, but I never pulled that off. So maybe I'll do that now that I have all this free time. Mike would go on to be provost for 12 years and my boss for 12 years. And we had a really good relationship based on mutual respect and humor. Sometimes the humor was most important. It was Mike that ultimately led me to go back to college. Mike never told me I had to, but he encouraged me to. And it occurred to me after they're working for him for 8 years or so that I might be a liability to him. Provosts, especially good provosts, make enemies. And I would really have hated for an enemy to pick me to attack him with. So finally, at 50 years old, I went back to school. I went a combination of full and part-time for 3 years. And in 3 years, I graduated, all while working full-time. I'd like to say it was really hard, and parts of it were, but also I had such resources. I had people who really helped me. I lived and worked on the campus. I knew its inner workings. I had a full computer, unlike my ephemeral college experience in 1976, I had computing, word processing. I could visit the library without leaving my couch. Anyway, so I got done and I did well. It had always worried me. It had never been a problem not having a college degree for most of my career. It was my own self-indulgence. I sometimes even wore it like a chip on my shoulder or a badge of honor. It wasn't until it occurred to me that I wouldn't be the only one living with the consequences of my not going to college that I finally did. So I went back to college and I finished it. And I'm really genuinely proud to be a UCI alumnus. So after 12 years, Mike left and in came Howard. And Howard was respectful, cheerful, optimistic, full of new ideas. And within a year, he got pulled into the chancellor's office. And he pulled me with him to be his chief of staff there. So here I was in the denouement of my career with a whole new set of criteria for the job, things I didn't know how to do or didn't even know I needed to do them. And I was a rookie after all this time. It was very humbling and it was good for my soul. The new environment allowed me to get energized, meet a whole bunch of new people, most of whom weren't directly affiliated or within the university, they were external. And it really stoked my fire. I really did well and I really enjoyed it. And I felt like I was valued and I felt valuable. So why'd you retire? Well, after 4 years, I was approaching my 60th birthday and my 40th year at UCI. And the way the retirement system works is you can retire without a loss of income. You can do very well. So there's always that option. But I was still being fed and nurtured by the job. But I also knew that I was currently valued and always would be treated well. But your contributions and the value of your contributions tends to ebb and flow with a cycle. And it was at a high point, which meant it was only going to go one other place. I felt like that office could benefit from some new blood and new ideas. I thought it would be important to make way for someone new to come in and have a career pathway for themselves. There are a lot of talent out there, and I was blocking the way. And most important, my garage was a mess. I read that Marie Kondo book and would look at my workbench, and nothing was giving me joy. So once I retired, I could attend to that garage. I could actually find you a screwdriver right now. So that's it. I retired. I'm happy. I'm an old man telling my old stories. And I don't know if there's anything to take away from that, but I appreciate the opportunity to have an audience. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Michael. So with that, we do have some time for Q&A. And the way we're going to do this, because we have so many people in the room, if you click on the participants tab at the bottom of your screen there, you'll see a raise hand function on the right side. And if you click raise hand, that will be a way to signal to Mike and I that you want to ask a question, and then we'll just call you and you can ask your question. So please, if you have a question to ask our illustrious speaker, please do so. Okay, Elizabeth Loftus, please go ahead. And then we'll.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Mike, hi, that was fabulous. Fabulous. I on this question that I was going to ask you, and you answered a little bit at the end. Why did you finally retire? I have a friend at UCLA who had 50 years into the system. And when I said, well, this financial compensation thing, you're basically paying to work. Why are you still working? He said, I'm afraid of becoming irrelevant. Did you ever have any feelings like that? I mean, that worked against the direction of going ahead and retiring?
In a word, no. It could be because, I'm a privileged white man and I just always feel relevant. There could be that. Or, I think when you are a staff person in a university as opposed to faculty, and I love you, you don't necessarily need to be on the pedestal. You're sort of I was more comfortable in the valet role. And so I either found that to give me relevance and satisfaction, or I found other parts of my life that I got that from. Linda and I just had a grandson a year and a half ago born, and that'll put you in your place.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ronnie, you're up next with your question.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for presenting today. I just had a quick question. You obviously have a really good sense of humor and a quick wit. And I wonder if you could kind of tell us a little bit about where that comes from and how it might have contributed to your success of your long career at UCI. Well,
first, I'd have to say that not everyone shares that view of my wit. I did, I think, early on see the value of it. I had a stepfather who had been a bartender in his earlier days, and he really in his mind never stopped being a bartender. And the thing about being a bartender is a million jokes, and that's actually your icebreaker for starting a conversation with someone. So maybe that, or one way to be funny is to hang out with a lot of funny people.
And look at that timing too, just like that. All right, Kirsten, you're up next.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Mike. Nice to see you and hear from you. I was thinking about your long, illustrious career and wondered, what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give your mid-career self? So not at the beginning of your career, not at the end, but what would you tell your mid-career self if you had the chance?
I don't know. Probably to know it's going to get better, because when you're in that middle. When you're in that middle part, I was talking to a mutual friend of ours the other day, and honestly, I worried about money every day, every minute of every day of my life until maybe 5 years ago. And the truth is, I worried about, that was my problem. Things are going to get okay. They're going to get okay or not okay, but you'll survive. I see that I was a little too worried at some point, especially in my mid-career, about my trajectory. I clearly didn't worry about my lack of a college education, and maybe I should have a little bit. But I would just tell that Mike to don't worry, it's going to be okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Next one up is Victor. Victor Sanchez.
Hey, Mike, how are you, Mike? Good to see you on here. You know, you had a very, very awesome and amazing run at UCI. We definitely appreciate your words of wisdom. For those of us that are not mid-career employees, or rather for those of us that started, recently, I'm going into my third year. So, what sort of wisdom and words of advice would you have for those ones that are still neophytes and are just, novices at UCI? Thanks, Mike.
One thing that I think I took too long to appreciate at UCI, from right at the beginning, I was interested in athletics at UCI. So I attended a lot of games and all that. But UCI has a big menu. I mean, more than Cheesecake Factory, right? There's a lot of things you can do and enjoy at UCI. Do them all. Do them all. It will turn you on. Even, it's hard for a lazy person to do that. And I am really a lazy person. But the more you go to the library things, go to Claire Trevor things. Everything's interesting. Everything's interesting. Even if you don't agree, even if you want to roll your eyes at the speaker, which I hope people were doing today, UCI has a huge menu of things to do, and take advantage of all of them. Push all the buttons.
Thank you, Mike. That's great advice. That's actually the advice I give students all the time. There's so many opportunities at UCI and so many different things to get involved in. They should try and, dabble with all of them as much as they can. David, you're up next with your question.
Hang on. Okay, I didn't expect that fast. Hi, Mike. I just really am curious, thinking about all the folks, including myself, that you mentored and talked with and supported along the way. Where does that come from for you? Why is that rewarding for you? What motivates that in you?
Well, I got mentored. I had a whole bunch of babysitters and I needed them. And so I felt, I don't want to make it sound like I felt like I was entitled or had some great wisdom to impart. But if anybody wanted to reach out, who was I to deny them my time? I always, or I almost always, and certainly the last 3/4 of my career, came to see myself as working for the whole institution. And that meant everybody. So if somebody needed help or thought they needed help, usually they didn't need it as much as they thought, who are you to deny that? Plus, it's really rewarding. While you think you're teaching, you're usually learning.
All right. Thank you, David, for the question. Next up is Jonathan Liu.
Hi, Mike. I was very interested in what your experience was like as a student, as an older student at UCI, and how did that change your perspective on the university?
Boy, it really did too. I appreciate that question. So one thing I learned really early on when I was going was to quickly go home and change my clothes or have a change of clothes in my office before I went to a class. Because if I showed up to a class wearing a coat and tie, this is back when you still had to physically use add and drop cards. I'd stand out in front of that new class on the first day, and all the kids were coming up to me to sign their ad cards. I was just another student. The other issue was sometimes I'd have an instructor who might not know who I was, but they suspected I was some administrator, and it would make them nervous. And so I tried to downplay that as much as I could, affect the look, wear a hoodie or whatever. No, I wasn't fooling anybody. I still was older than most of those kids' parents, but it toned it down a little bit. The other thing I noticed, walking a mile in a kid's shoes, gee, I need this book for this class. Oh, gee, the book's not available, or the book is $1 jillion, or I need to turn this in by such and such a date, and there's a huge line to do it. To walk in the student's shoes a little bit was a good thing to do, and I really think it was especially good for someone who worked on the 5th floor of Aldrich Hall to get a little taste of what it's really like, because you're so insular up there. It benefited me to live life as a student for a while.
Thank you, Mike. Rose Jones, you're up next.
Yeah, Mike, you talked about your late finishing of your college degree. and how meaningful that was. But on top of that, you had some honors bestowed upon you, one of them being PBK. And I wonder if you could talk about what that meant for you.
Well, so in the ancient days when I grew up, they used to, Phi Beta Kappa was really prestigious and known by most people to be prestigious. A phrase in the 60s was often, well, you don't have to be a Phi Beta Kappa to understand that blah, blah, blah. And you know, it's interesting, over the last few decades, that's changed. Nobody really does that anymore. They talk about, well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that blah, blah, blah. So I think more than a typical undergraduate student, I knew the value of Phi Beta Kappa. I just didn't have any idea I would qualify for it. You know, it's hard to do. It's harder to get the Latin honors. It's really hard. But I was fortunate enough to have been invited to it. And then once I was in it, I was all in because I saw the value in it. You know, it's mission to try and continue to embrace the liberal arts. I mean, it's when I talk about, I didn't go to college for vocational reasons. I didn't go to college to make robots. I went to college to keep my boss safe and to round out myself intellectually. And that is the essence of Phi Beta Kappa and what it stands for. It's the liberal arts experience. It's the opening your mind to a variety of areas: science, social sciences, humanities, arts, the whole gamut. Anyway, so that's what it meant to me.
All right, everyone, we've come upon our time. Let's give Michael Arias our clapping emoji. Great, job, well done, as always. Thank you for your talk today, Mike. I want to thank Kim Ayala for introducing you. Also, Will Alvarez from UCI Media in the back. And especially I want to thank all of you for participating in the great questions. And thank you for being here today and participating in the What Matters to Me and Why program. So have a great rest of the day and great rest of the week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.